being here. So I'm going to talk to you today about behaviour change psychology and how we can use that to get improved recycling outcomes. I'm going to talk about the belief bias and how we can use values to overcome that belief bias. So I'm going to cover some of the psychological barriers to environmental action, look at some of the messaging that doesn't work, and then some of the principles that we can use in our messaging that do work. These principles aren't all encompassing, and they're only some of the ideas to come out of brain science. So let's get into it. You'll probably know a little bit about Planet Ark. We're a not-for-profit environmental organisation. Besides Tree Day, we have a suite of these recycling programs, as Julie mentioned. So the barriers to environmental action from a psychological perspective have to do with distance. So the first one is about hypothetical distance, where problems are too uncertain. And we see a lot of that in the climate skeptic people that have those types of views. Secondly is temporal distance. It's all happening in the future. It's not affecting me now, therefore I won't worry about it now. Another barrier is it's happening somewhere else. So there's not a pile of waste in my backyard, out of sight, out of mind. And social distance, so the people affected are unlike me. On top of these barriers, as you're aware, we have this issue that's been in the mainstream media. And these types of headlines, for those that don't see recycling as valuable, are only going to reinforce their beliefs and their behaviour. For others, it's going to reduce the trust in the system. And the components of trust from a psychological perspective are to do with authenticity, rigour in logic, and having empathy towards the audience. So we need to remember those things when we're looking to build trust again in the community. Education is going to be more important than ever in the coming year, so we need to ensure that it's effective. So some of the messaging that has been proven not to work. Probably understand what the legacy hypothesis is, where we want to leave a healthy environment for our next generation. There was a UK study published just this year that surveyed 40,000 households over a period of 3 years, and it asked these households about their lifestyle choices. So it broke couples up into two different groups based on their answers. Those that had a low level of environmental concern, and then those that had a high level of environmental concern. So what happened when these couples had children? You would think that having children would change our behaviour and our attitude for the better. There was actually a small decrease in environmental behaviour for those that had a low environmental concern. For the greener couples, there was a small increase in the desire to act more sustainably, but not so much in the behaviour change. So what was going on here? So the researchers concluded that parenthood is a time where our focus and priorities are on the immediate issues of the children and not so much of the environment, and especially not those of future environmental concerns like climate change. So this type of messaging probably won't work when it comes to behaviour change. And there are many, many studies that back this up. So what do you think might be wrong with this messaging when it comes to behaviour change? So the word save speaks of sacrifice and abstinence and making an effort. And the word planet is quite abstract, it's not specific, and it's quite distant. It might be a good rallying call to sign a petition, but it relies on our survival instincts. And the issue with that is that our survival instincts are about self-preservation in the short term, and it's rarely collective. This quote by Richard Dawkins, it's rather bleak, but it kind of sums it up. Sustainability is all about long-term benefits of the world. If it were left to Darwinism alone, there would be no hope. Short-term greed is bound to win. Luckily, it's not left to Darwinism alone, and we as educators, as communicators and marketers, that's where we come in. What about this type of messaging? How does that make you feel? Yes, it's thought-provoking, probably accurate, but it's going to create apathy. People will generally feel overwhelmed by the complexity of the issue, and there's no actual agency for the audience. There's no, you're not providing them an action. What about throwing facts and stats at people? It's tempting. However, humans rationalise our actions. If we see information that doesn't support our beliefs and behaviour, then we tend to ignore it. If we see information that does support our behaviour, then we actually feel pleasure from that. Neuroscientists have shown that there's a rush of dopamine, so we actually reward ourselves. And we've known about this information education not actually working from way back in the 1970s, when the US had a national campaign to reduce energy, and they provided an information-only campaign throwing lots of stats and figures at households. It amounted to negligible change and didn't reduce energy use. But providing information is not wrong, but relying on it alone is. So you have to motivate people. So how can we connect with people to change their behaviour? So to communicate effectively, we need to understand their values and wants. Now, psychologists have theorised that people want three things. They want personal gain, they don't want to live with less generally, but they want to make things better. So we need to understand their beliefs and break the belief bias where appropriate. So what is the belief bias? It can be defined as accepting things that fit in within our existing belief systems and rejecting those that don't. Logic and facts aren't going to break the bias. We have, once we have a belief system in place, we have an emotional attachment to it. It's also part of our social identity, and that's why it's hard to break the belief system and change people's minds once it's in place. The good news is, and hopefully that corny stock photo isn't too offensive, changing behaviour doesn't necessarily mean a change in beliefs. So people don't fully know what influences them and what motivates them to change behaviour or in their behaviour. And beliefs tend to be reverse engineered. So take, for example, a climate skeptic who may decide to ride to work because it's become more convenient and they want to keep fit. that same climate skeptic lives on a street where everyone around him is getting solar panels on the roof. And so he feels socially pressured to do the same. All of a sudden, you've got a climate skeptic that's riding to work and has solar panels on their roof. So they've changed their behaviour before their beliefs. But the good thing is he has a new social identity, so he's more likely to be open to actions that do combat climate change. So on to the principles that work. So linking our messaging to positive desires and aspirations. I'm just going to fly over this, but you may have seen this before, Maslow's motivational hierarchy of needs, where once our basic needs are met, we crave belonging to a social group, esteem, we want to feel pride and accomplishment, and self-actualisation, where we want to be the best we can be and give back to the community. There was a Princeton University study published last year that looked at pride versus guilt as a motivation. It gave participants a choice between eco-friendly and non-eco-friendly choices. It also asked them how much they'd be willing to pay per green amenity of $3 each per week for things such as water saving, shower heads and solar lighting. Before the participants made their decision, they were reminded that you may feel guilt on when you make a decision. One group was reminded that as you make your decision, keep in mind that you might feel pride after you've made your decision. So who won? Pride. So it led to a much higher uptake of environmental actions being carried out. So this is an example of the Cartridges for Planet Art campaign using these principles. It looks at, it's using collective pride. It's also using positive social proof. So it's showing that a lot of people are doing the right thing. And this is an example from our business recycling campaign where we've produced graphics for businesses to use to help celebrate their recycling or waste reduction achievements. And they can promote to their customers and look at instilling pride in their staff as well. So the second principle is making our messaging more personally relevant. And I just wanted to show you an example of this study where they used social media advertising of a crossword puzzle app. And there were two distinct ads. One that was aimed at those with high openness. The people with high openness are imaginative, creative, and then an ad that was targeted at low openness. So those that prefer tradition and are more conservative. So as you'd expect, the colourful, imaginative ad appealed to those with high openness. And so they downloaded the app much more than the other ad, and vice versa to those people that had low openness. This is an example of behaviour change messaging where the person may not have sustainability as part of their major values. It might be home improvements, but linking energy efficiency with saving money and energy is a way that can change behaviour. And for business, this is an example of a Planet Ark Facebook post for our business recycling campaign. We've used a New South Wales EPA business case study. Rather than Planet Ark telling businesses, you know, you need to take responsibility, we're using a champion business do that for us. So here we highlight where improving waste management systems can make your workplace more efficient and effective. In this case, they were able to provide more time to customers, have more space, and improve their reputation as well. All things that businesses would see the benefit of. Third principle is valuing people's roles. So people want to play a role. They dislike feeling incompetent. So empowering the community, letting them have their say on current and new initiatives allows them to play that role. It's also a strategy for business. There was a UK study done in 2015 where a survey of UK organisations found that empowering staff to contribute to the program through problem-solving groups and identifying recycling champions helped improve employee participation in that recycling program and improve teamwork at the same time. Finally, the one really easy persuasion technique everyone should know. It's a bit of obvious clickbait there. But you are free. What does that mean? You got it. So this is about valuing self-motivated change, but you are free to choose. There was a study, or a review of 42 studies actually, where the you are free to choose technique was looked at the results. It found that reminding people that they have a choice actually doubled the chance of them saying yes. So this is saying yes to such things as donations, doing surveys, etc. So one way perhaps that we could use it in recycling is recycle right. The choice is yours. Okay. Respecting people's autonomy has the happy side effect of making them more open to persuasion. So I'm just going to fly through this one. This is another example of a business recycling resource where we link the individual impact to the benefits, and we also thank them for recycling, which links back to the valuing of people's roles. So in summary, what doesn't work? Don't just think of the children. Don't save the planet. Don't just talk about doom and gloom. And don't just provide facts. Principles that work: use positive desires like pride, make it personally relevant, using the CDS to raise funds for your local charity, value people's roles, and value self-motivated change. So you are free to use these principles, but ultimately the choice is yours.